By now we know many of the implications of a yes-yes result in Friday's family and care referendum, but here are three more reasons to vote no, and they pertain to euthanasia, female military conscription and child marriage. There is a viral clip of Leo Varadkar going around in which he says that in his opinion it is not the state's responsibility to look after those who need extra care, such as the elderly and the disabled. Rather, it's the responsibility of families. One would wonder why people should pay taxes all their lives just to hear the so-called leader of our country say this. Also, he has a salary bigger than the President of the United States, and so it's easy for him to say that he will look after his family members should they need that. Furthermore, his generous salary is paid by the taxpayer. Nonetheless, we should be glad of what he said because, if we didn't know it before, we certainly know now that this load of nonsense about looking after the rights of everyone with these constitutional amendments is exactly that, a load of nonsense. I would be saying, always believe people when they tell you who they are, and this man has told us who he is now several times. The state does not want to look after you, end of story. Not when you are sick, old, disabled, etc. And although we have all heard the expression that life is cheap, the truth is life is actually financially costly and the state knows it. What is actually cheap is death, and soon euthanasia will be available within Ireland. It will be mooted that the availability of it is for the benefit of the people, but this availability may also be very beneficial to the state, and for this reason we should vote no to the care and family amendments. The reason I include the family aspect as well is because theoretically there is nothing stopping the state from arguing, in particular instances, that people are in durable relationships with one another and therefore are responsible for providing care for one another should either party need it. Euthanasia is presented as another progressive, neoliberal, empowering choice, but what it would also likely be at some point in the future is something people may feel pressurised or coerced into choosing, which is what Canada is currently doing to its citizens. In 2022, euthanasia was the sixth leading cause of death in Canada. It has gone from a country in which euthanasia was banned just a few years ago to one which allows euthanasia to be suggested as an option to very vulnerable people, as opposed to other countries where it is forbidden for healthcare staff to offer euthanasia. Rather, in other countries, it has to be a consideration only brought forth by the person who then may be euthanized. So anyway, when I heard the Taoiseach say what he did, I immediately thought about assisted suicide. If it can even be called that in the case of people who are being made to feel like it's their only solution because the state doesn't want to or won't help them. In Ireland, the Dying with Dignity Bill has been the subject of debate and discussion in the Seanad for some time now. A select number of people known as the Committee on Assisted Dying have been debating and discussing euthanasia. The public will not have a say. According to one committee member, People for Profit TD Gino Kenny, there doesn't need to be a public referendum on euthanasia, and the committee has stated they have no plans to carry out an open call for submissions from the public. In other words, the opinion of the public is surplus to requirements. Anyone who will be familiar with Gino Kenny will shudder at the thoughts of this woefully inept individual deciding the ins and outs of euthanasia legislation. Similarly with Senator Lynn Ruane, who is also on the committee and has advocated during debates for people with mental health issues to be allowed access to assisted suicide services when they materialise. It is horrifying beyond belief to think that she thinks a solution to depression is suicide, especially when you consider she has spoken in the past about how depression-related suicide is more prevalent in the working class communities she claims to represent. I am currently writing extensively for a video about euthanasia that will be finished in the coming days. The contents of it and what potentially awaits us when they introduce assisted suicide to Ireland are truly horrifying, and you have to ask yourself why they would have a referendum which, as they claim, is just to give people some token constitutional recognition, yet won't give people a referendum on euthanasia, which is on balance a much more serious matter for the people. Likewise with the dubious soft tissue bill, we did not have a referendum for that either, despite similar issues, as we have with the Dying with Dignity bill regarding ethics and safeguarding. I am also planning a video about the soft tissue bill, and am currently awaiting answers from the Department of Health Bioethics Department regarding questions I raised. When I have a reply from them, I will make the video, and I would urge people to listen to both the videos, as these will explain how these bills will impact us all in the future in some way, and for some the impact may be profound. But to go back to the Taoiseach now, when he told us that it is not the state's responsibility to look after your family members, we could see that the state's agenda is ultimately to remove rather than add more supports for those who are elderly or disabled. So we could see a situation in time with a yes result where the state pushes all responsibility onto families. We have already seen them close 50 nursing homes in 4 years, which is yet more evidence that they are trying to wash their hands of the responsibility for vulnerable people. I foresee a situation where, due to feeling like or being made to feel like they are a burden to their families, elderly and disabled people may feel like they have no option but to choose assisted suicide, and in some extreme circumstances may even be coerced or encouraged to take this path. Euthanasia may start out as something that will only be available to those with a terminal illness, but as we have already discussed, Lynn Ruane has put forward that it should be available to people with depression before the bill is even passed, and euthanasia in Canada in particular, but also in the Netherlands and other countries, is not what it originally started out as, that is ostensibly for those who are suffering immensely from an incurable terminal illness. It is strayed into truly nightmarish dystopian reality in Canada, and people are being coerced into euthanasia if they are seen as a burden. For example, homeless people and those with even mild disabilities such as partial hearing loss have been targeted. Canada is essentially using euthanasia to dispatch of their vulnerable people. Furthermore, it is due to be extended to those with depression or other mental health difficulties this March, despite the fact that one would imagine your ability to think clearly and therefore consent to euthanasia might be impaired if you have depression or some other mental health difficulty. It has also been officially proposed within the Canadian Senate that euthanasia be extended to 12-year-olds or mature minors, as they refer to them as, and it is proposed they should be able to make this decision without parental consent. In the Netherlands, 16-year-olds can access assisted suicide services without parental consent if they suffer from depression, anxiety, or some other mental health condition, and you can see how dangerous this could potentially be. At a young age, even a broken heart can seem like the end of the world. There will be more on all of that in the coming days, but as you can see from what I've outlined here, another reason to vote no is to ensure the state cannot remove financial or other supports from elderly or disabled people and their families, and to ensure they cannot remove their obligation to look after vulnerable people and their families. I know they don't do a good job of providing that kind of care anyway, but we don't want to create a situation whereby they have no obligation whatsoever. And we could be creating a situation where euthanasia may become, as I said, a consideration for those who feel as though they are a burden or are being made to feel as though they are. Also, we can already see how the Canadian government is coercing vulnerable people into euthanasia in order that they do not have to fulfil their responsibility. And as we know, Varadkar is cut from the same callous cloth as his friend Justin Trudeau and would be very happy to follow the same path as the Canadian Prime Minister in regards to euthanasia. So let's not water down the state's constitutional obligations towards elderly people, disabled people or their families when we go to the polling stations tomorrow. In regards to conscription, a couple of people raised concerns around the outcome of a yes vote in the care amendment part of the referendum in regard to how that may leave women vulnerable to conscription in the future in the instance that our neutrality is forsaken. I have asked a barrister if female military conscription could be an issue in the future as a result of removing from women the right to stay in the home and not be forced out to work due to economic necessity, and this barrister told me it could conceivably be an issue and that it's certainly something we should be asking questions about. I'm afraid I have more questions than I do answers because I'm not of a legal background, but any agenda is possible with this government and their masters' hidden agendas. President of the EU Commission Ursula von der Leyen has made no attempt to hide her contempt for Ireland's neutrality, and in her presidential address to the Union in 2021, she spoke of her desire to have an EU army and said, "There's no point in having one if we don't use it." Sounds like if she can manifest this army, it will be used on the offence rather than in defence. Currently, the Emerald Isle stands in the way of this witch's goals to establish what she wants, And her flying monkeys in the Irish government will help her get what she wants. Most people probably do not know that those at the top in the EU refer to Ireland and her people as Irish schnorrers. This is a Yiddish word meaning scrounger or beggar. In this sense here, it asserts that we piggyback off of other nations, not pulling our weight when it comes to issues of conflict. The people's desire and sensibility as a small nation to remain peaceful is a massive problem for von der Leyen, who has sought that, quote, political will be overcome in Ireland to eradicate air neutrality, and also that of Malta and Austria, who are also neutral. How very irritating it must be for this wannabe Hitler in heels that in her geopolitical playground, one of the smaller kids like Ireland is quashing her fantasy of picking fights with some of the world's biggest players. She simply cannot establish her army unless all of the countries give up their neutrality. And there's only 3 who haven't. We need to hang on to this neutrality. Sweden is a cautionary tale for us Irish. They gave up theirs, and then in January, Swedish people were panicked after they were told by their government that war was going to come to Sweden and that each and every Swede should prepare. Fast forward to today, the 7th of March 2024, and Sweden have officially become a member of NATO, just a day shy of our referendum. Ireland's membership in the EU has long since been a problem for the EU because of our neutrality, as I said, and how this affects common foreign and security policy. And if we wish to remain a member state, then sooner or later we will be forced to give this up. We have certainly seen moves being made towards this, and Ursula's soldiers on the ground here, as in Varadkar and co., would have us in NATO tomorrow if they could make it happen. In the meantime, it is possible that this referendum would weaken women's rights enough for them to be vulnerable to military conscription in the future. We can't be sure of that, but why take the chance? Conscription, which I believe will come to all EU countries in due course, and for this reason I suggest you add protecting your daughters from future conscription as another reason to vote no to the Care Amendment. Yet another reason to vote no relates to child marriage. Child marriage is already happening in Ireland, but a yes vote would, in my view, not only see the prevalence increase, but also the neoliberal acceptability of it. It is important to bear in mind that where there is child marriage, there is also child rape. Nikahs or marriage blessings occur regularly, like the one Umar al-Qadri claims he was providing a marriage cert for, and nikahs are used as a loophole through which child marriage can be facilitated, which is just one reason why al-Qadri's hate crime claim deserved scrutiny, because he was signing a marriage cert for a couple he had never met, and this is partly what I mean when I say there is an acceptance of child marriage. He didn't even check to see if the bride was underage or not. The media and the far left fall over themselves to stand in solidarity with this imam and never once question if he could be facilitating underage marriage blessings. As far back as 2012, I can find court cases relating to child marriage. In that year, a case reached the High Court in which an annulment was sought by a 16-year-old who had been forced into a marriage with a 29-year-old man. The ceremony took place at the Islamic Foundation on the North Circular Road, Dublin, and as far as I'm aware, those who facilitated the marriage were not criminally punished, and this was because even though marriages in which either spouse is under 18 are not legally recognised, the marriage was nonetheless deemed legally valid at the time as a result of a successful pre-marriage application by the girl and the man to a circuit court for relevant exemption under Section 33 of the Act. However, the girl had been coerced and she disappeared afterwards when she was returned to her parents by Tusla and the courts. She had said she wanted to go home and did not want her parents to get into trouble, but it did not occur to Tusla or the courts that the child could have been saying this under duress. In my view, there is already tacit approval from Tusla as well as the government, NGOs and media in relation to child marriage because they don't do anything to prevent it or highlight it. Entering the term durable relationships into our constitution would, as we know, and has been confirmed by Government Minister Neil Richmond, widen the parameters of family reunification rules. In short, this means more immigration. On The Tonight Show on Thursday, March the 6th, Helen McEntee said, "At the moment, family reunification rules only allow parents to be reunited with minor children. I think she neglected to mention family reunification rules also apply to legal spouses, which seems like a significant omission. Currently, under those rules, polygamy is not legally recognised. However, by adding durable relationships, such unions will not necessarily need to be recognised, and while the government has insisted polygamy won't be recognised if the family amendment is passed, McEntee said last night that the reason why they did not define durable relationships is because people would then be picking on what they did not include as a durable relationship. So she is essentially saying then that no relationship is excluded under this ill-defined term. And that, of course, also means polygamy. So this leads, of course, to polygamy potentially being recognised as a durable relationship, some of which will be child marriages. In Islam, child marriage is very common. Once a female enters puberty, she is seen as mature enough to marry, and the age at which females go through puberty is lowering by the year. It is not unheard of to begin puberty at 8, and more girls are now beginning at 10. Some of the marriages that may in the future qualify for family reunification also may consist of a female party who, while they may now be a young adult in the eyes of the law, may nonetheless have been forced into such a union when they were underage and are now being coerced to stay within that marriage. We should endeavour to never support forced marriage, either directly or indirectly. An yes vote would amount to indirect, if nonetheless unwitting consent of the people. There are polygamous unions within the country whereby the marriages may not be legally recognised, but a man with 2 or more wives may be able to attain social welfare and housing from one wife and family, and then the subsequent wives and children make claims separate to the husband. But there are also men whose subsequent wives are in another country, as they haven't qualified for reunification. My Muslim neighbour told me he has a second wife, unbeknownst to his first, and this wife lives in Pakistan. Under new family reunification rules, he could potentially bring this wife here. His beleaguered wife, who is here in this country, has 6 children, 4 of whom are boys. Naturally, they will be encouraged by their father to feel it is their right to have more than one wife when they are older, and the daughters may possibly be forced into marriage. The establishment will tell you child marriage isn't acceptable or legal here, although curiously they never actually make mention of it, although it's occurring, which they are fully aware of, as there have been legal cases, as I have mentioned. And girlsnotbrides.org has criticised Ireland for not living up to their promises to end this practice within this country. Under a Freedom of Information request in May 2023, I asked TUSLA to provide statistics on the prevalence of child marriage within Ireland, and their reply was, I am the decision maker assigned to your request, and the purpose of this letter is to convey my decision in the matter, which is unfortunately to refuse your request. I will now explain my decision. A search was carried out by TUSLA's chief social worker. They have advised that this data is not collected by TUSLA. We do not hold this data. The question is, why don't they hold this information? Why aren't they compiling information from cases they come across? Doesn't this amount to allowing this practice to proliferate in our Western society? And of course, because of that, then we don't want to have even more child marriages that are coming into the country. Of course, before Muslims ever came to Ireland, forced marriage in some communities was an issue, which is all the more reason why TUSLA should be compiling data on it. I've spoken in the past to Muslim ladies who say they were removed from school at a pre-teen age in order that their parents could marry them off. I've been informed that TUSLA does not always intervene in these cases where girls just disappear from school. And why is that? What all this shows is that they cannot be trusted to stamp out this practice, and therefore we should vote no to the family amendment, so as we do not further encourage circumstances by where child marriage will increase in Ireland. Germany is a good country to look at to examine statistics and the permissive attitudes that have developed there as a result of the same liberal attitudes that are pervasive within this country. This may then give us an idea of what the problem may look like here. Child marriage first became an issue in Germany in 2015, the year when mass immigration started to get out of control there. By July 2016, 1,500 minors were registered as married and 341 were under the age of 14. By 2017, German Parliament had passed laws ending child marriage, but only a handful of marriages were annulled and young girls are still married off every week. Worse than that, liberal government-funded agencies and NGOs have started arguing that annulling child marriages is not always in the best interests of the affected child. The Max Planck Institute, which receives government funding but also funding from Bill and Melinda Gates, has argued this exact point, and a leftist publication said the ban on child marriage is racist, small-minded, and targets vulnerable people. The last thing we need in this country is for child marriages to increase as a result of this durable relationships aspect of the referendum, which may allow for already married child brides to come here, because you just know the likes of People Before Profit will then start arguing in favour of allowing such unions to continue or to be allowed in. It may even be the case that people will not declare that they are married to a child, but will be able to be reunited with their child bride nonetheless by claiming that the child is their stepdaughter, as such a relationship may qualify as a durable relationship. So for this and for other reasons mentioned, it is important to vote no to the family amendment so that we avoid loopholes in which forced child marriage can flourish within Ireland. So to conclude, we all know we are being lied to left, right and centre in relation to this referendum. The assertion is that it's simply to remove archaic language and give recognition to all types of families. They could have, for example, added the word father into Article 41.2 rather than remove the word mother. These amendments are a Trojan horse for so many agendas, and voting yes, yes could have far-reaching consequences, resulting in many undesirable outcomes that could affect our society into perpetuity. Our government works for the EU, UN and others, and it was the UN who first criticised Article 41.2 and recommended it be amended. This alone is a reason to reject the proposed changes. The EU, UN and others have a vested interest in interfering with our domestic affairs, but that is a video for another day, although most of you are probably aware of this interference. For now, let's focus on tomorrow, when for the first time in a few years, we are getting the chance to assert our boundaries as a people with this abhorrent and immoral government. The other day, I was asked to speak at a protest at the Garden of Remembrance, and I used a famous quote to make a point. That quote was from Ronald Reagan, who said, "The 9 most terrifying words are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And it always makes me think of those in the Dáil. They've sold this referendum as an attempt on their part to help everyone, be they carers, disabled, single mothers, etc. And I would say, if you are still in any doubt, let that quote ring in your head as you cast your vote tomorrow. Please vote no.